Welcome back, everybody, to the Nosebleeds, the show for below average bettors by below average bettors. And we're back for the second edition, this time for UFC 270. It's January 19th, 2022. A lovely Thursday or so, I hope. Dominic, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling good, Noah, and I've been murky on this card all week as we're about to get into all the odds and stuff. There's a lot of huge favorites, a lot of big time underdogs. There's value all over the place, but there's risky bets all over the place. Of course, we have the heavyweight title fight. We've got the flyweight championship and a couple other good matchups that I think are going to fly under the radar. Very excited, my friend, to get on the betting breakdown.
It feels like a sink or swim type of week. I mean, it really does. It's a tough card. There might be a lot of what's that word? Like bets that look really appealing, but they're probably just like grenades, basically.
Yeah,
like they're landmines.
You're gonna lose all your money.
Yeah. Like there's some, and maybe we're gonna have some on our bet slip. Who knows? But
well, I hope not.
Before we get into anything for this weekend, we got to start with UFC Vegas 46, Dominic.
That's right. Last week's action, Noah.
Yeah, just do a little recap of the below average bet slip, kind of see how we did, and assess anything that surprised us or was not surprising, I guess. So we ended up coming out on the plus side, which is good, plus 1.52 units. All of our bets were 1 unit apiece, by the way, so that's something to keep in mind. You can see here the checks obviously are for the ones that hit, and the X's are for the ones that didn't. And we got what our bets were along with the odds as we placed them. So Dominic, is there anything that kind of stood out to you from these 5 that was surprising or was kind of a given to you?
I mean, the given, of course, was the Caitlin Chukagian win by decision. We talked about it in our recap episode.
I mean, that's easy money.
That's easy money. I mean, I saw someone say there's 3 things in life that are certain: death, taxes, and Caitlin Chukagian to win by decision. And it cashed here. That's 10 wins for her, all via decision. So loved seeing the green check mark next to that one for sure.
Yeah, I was very shocked, actually, that your catered Chikadze to go to distance hit. I think that was a very smart play, but not something that I was... Especially after round 1, I said, "There's no chance this is going to a decision." I was like, that was too wild, too much of a beatdown.
Yeah.
But I think Chikadze's showing a lot of heart, and Calvin Kattar. I don't think he let off the gas really, but I think his power just isn't quite the one-punch power that maybe you would think a guy with the boxing prowess he has might possess. But, I mean,
right.
no disrespect. It was a great performance. But definitely was surprised that fight went to the distance either way. And, I mean, can we talk about
Brandon I was going to bring it up if you weren't.
I mean, come on. Brandon Royval win by finish. If you guys didn't see the fight between Brandon Royval and Rogerio Bontorin, it was a very good fight. Very close fight. But in round 3, correct? That was round 3, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Royval gets an armbar on Bontorin, and Bontorin clearly gives a tap and looks at the ref, but it's like a one tapper, like a one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, referee Mark Smith doesn't see it.
Yeah.
They never review it, so the fight goes to a decision. Luckily, Royval gets the win, as he should have, considering he basically won the fight twice. But, man, that one hurt me sitting at home. That could have been just what I needed to kind of bring myself up over the top for the week. And
I know we could have went 4-1 on the first week of the show. It's just it's a shame.
Yeah, Joseph Holmes was another dud for me. I mean, making his debut, I really believed in what I saw from him on the Contender Series, and just shows it's kind of another level once you bring it to the big leagues. But it was a terrible fight.
Yes, not the best. There were a few of those types of fights last week. So
yeah, but that was UFC Vegas 46, Dominic.
There it is.
Yep. So let's kind of switch gears, get into UFC 270, and that starts with the main event Moneyline.
Oh, does it, Noah?
And we got 2 to talk about, both title fights. Let's start with the main event. Francis Ngannou at plus 120. looking to make the first defense of his heavyweight title against the interim champion Ciryl Gane at -148. Is it?
Yes, -148.
Great. So, I guess the obvious thing to point out here right away, Dominic, champion going in as the underdog.
Yeah.
You don't see it. You don't see it very often. Now, is there a good reason for these odds? Like, when you look at these odds, are you kind of like, yeah, that's not too surprising to me that Ciryl Gane's a favorite going in?
I'm not necessarily surprised that Gane is the favorite, but at the same time, man, this is Francis Ngannou, a guy coming in 5 straight wins, all via knockout. He beat our boy Stipe to win the belt. For what it's worth, too, this is going to be the 4th heavyweight unification bout where we've had a champion versus interim champion. Of the first 3, 2 times the champion has beaten the interim champion, with only 1 interim coming out on top. That was Fabricio Verdum versus Cain Velasquez back in like 2015, I think was when it was.
Around that.
So, take with that what you will. Francis Ngannou being an underdog is always going to probably flash some value to a lot of people. I know we're going to get into this fight even more specifically later. But again, not surprised, but just a little weary. I wanted to stay away from this fight as much as I could, but as you'll see later, it just pulled me right back.
I agree with you so much about trying to stay away from this fight. It's one of my most anticipated fights that's going to happen all year, and I can already tell you that without knowing most of the year's calendar, but it doesn't get bigger than this fight. And obviously on our podcast, which that episode's coming out tomorrow, you can check that out. We're going to go over a lot of the storyline behind that fight, but in terms of just pure odds here, the closest comp to Francis Ngannou is Derek Lewis. I mean, that's kind of the closest comparison that you can make. And Ciryl Gane completely dominated that fight.
Masterclass, yeah.
Now, I stand by the Francis Ngannou who beat Stipe that second time, in their second fight, I should say. I don't think there's a man on earth who can beat that Francis Ngannou.
Yeah, I mean, that was far and away the best Francis we'd ever seen.
And it comes down to, with Francis, all these fights are ending so quickly. That Stipe one barely gets into the second round. So you don't really see enough to, fully commit. You see how good his takedown defense was, and you're like, oh, wait a minute.
That was
you
impressive.
even saw him kind of shooting for some double legs and looking not really able to necessarily hold Stipe down, but overpower him for sure. Mm-hmm. And you're kind of like, it just makes you kind of go, wait a minute, is that a thing? Is that a part of his weaponry now?
Right.
But then he lands an amazing left hand, and all of a sudden, fight's over. And you're like, well, he ended up winning it with the bread and butter, but I would have liked to have maybe seen a little bit more of that other stuff just to see if, how much has he really evolved?
Yeah, well, and to your point, when you say, we haven't gotten to see Francis as much, it's the complete opposite on the flip side for the interim champion and Ciryl Gane. We've seen him go 25 minutes twice with Alexander Volkov and Jairzinho Rozenstruik. He went into the third round with Derek Lewis. We've seen him get finishes. We've seen him get decisions. We've seen him get submissions, for crying out loud. So, again, two polar opposites in terms of what we've seen in the past couple of years leading into this combination of a unification bout. Whew, it doesn't get better.
Yeah, it's a 50-50 fight, in my opinion, in my head.
Yes.
And depending on how confident you at home or either of us are one way or another, I think there's value to be had on each side.
For sure.
You get deep into some of these plays. I mean, I even love the idea of Francis Ngannou round one to win round one, just to win round one, not to finish in round one, but
win the round.
Stuff like that you can win some easy money on potentially. And obviously, I would say though that no matter how confident you are, I think this fight is so flip-floppy, so wishy-washy that I wouldn't recommend. And for us personally, I don't plan on putting a lot of money on this fight.
Tread lightly,
because especially if you're a Ciryl Gane guy.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that Ngannou's power, just with one punch, it's just done. I mean, Ciryl Gane could be putting in 3.5 rounds of just masterclass and then boop, knocked out.
Exactly, man.
So it's one I would tread lightly on, but man, this fight is so exciting.
I can't wait. One of the biggest heavyweight fights of all time, for sure.
And then the co-main event, also part of the main event money line, is the trilogy bout. Dominic, for the men's flyweight title, this time the roles reversed. Brandon Moreno comes in the champion. Davison Figueiredo comes in the challenger. Now, the first of this three-part saga, this trilogy, was one of the best fights of 2020. It's one of the last fights of 2020 as well. It was a draw. I think most people tended to kind of lean Figgy, but he had the point taken away, so that's kind of why it ended up being a draw.
For sure.
And then the second fight was a complete masterclass by Moreno, just one of the best performances of 2021. I mean, a great showing. He gets a submission, rear naked choke win in round 2 over Davison, or was it round 3?
He got it in round 3. Yeah.
Got it in round 3, but dominant for the whole fight.
Yes.
So there was a lot of questions on, do you run that fight back again? And they really weren't planning to do it. They wanted to move forward with Pantoja against Moreno. Pantoja, unfortunately, unable to commit and fight on the date, so they switched gears and do the trilogy. And as far as these odds, Dominic, what are we looking at right now? I know you said that currently it looks like Moreno is starting to pull away as a bigger favorite as we go into fight night.
Yeah, just from today, we're recording this on Wednesday. This morning, as I was starting to put all the notes together, he was a minus 167 favorite. Now, as we're recording this, he's minus 177. The former champion, Davison Figueiredo, the underdog at plus 145. So, again, Ngannou, Gane pulling together, getting a little closer in terms of the odds. Moreno, Figueiredo growing apart here. So that's a bit interesting. I think these odds being almost 2-1 now for Moreno is simply because of how great he looked in that last performance. And it's hard to say, was there enough time? Has, Davison, for those that don't know, he switched camps for this trilogy fight. He's training with Henry Cejudo now in Arizona. So could that play a factor here? Or is Moreno just kind of have his number? Because that was the type of performance that he put on in that rematch. Was just, again, one of our performance of the years for our MMA award show, if you guys haven't seen that. So I understand this money line more than the main event with Gane being the significant favorite.
Yeah, I saw some people surprised by it. I think the second fight was so one-sided that this is clearly, if anything, I think it's like very accurate to how my feelings are on this fight. And it's definitely Moreno is growing as a favorite, but I think Davison is definitely a live dog for sure. I mean, he's he looks to be in the best shape of his career if you look at the pictures of him, and that can all be deceiving for sure, but looks to be making this weight cut better than maybe he has in his last few performances, which can bode well for seeing a complete performance out of him on Saturday. But Dominic, I'm going to throw a stat at you. And I know MMA math it's like my least favorite. It's
right.
Not my favorite thing, but this is going to be the 12th time that a fighter who had lost a title fight gets another title fight right after.
Okay, I see where you're going here.
So it's the 12th time in UFC's history, and Davison being that fighter this time. Those previous 11 times, the fighters are 1-10.
Wow.
And the only
Who's the one winner?
Well, funny enough, it was that title fight at UFC 267 between Corey Sandhagen and Peter Yan when both guys were coming in off losses.
Gotcha.
So, kind of clearly, that one was someone's got to win.
Right.
So 1-10, and when I saw that, I was actually kind of contemplating making Davison Figueiredo my dog of the week. And just because how good he's looked, and I think Moreno, while he's fantastic and definitely showing so much improvement, it's hard for me to look past that Davison who we saw in 2020 and how dominant he could be and how good he looked in the first fight with Moreno. So a part of me was definitely leaning that way, but then when I saw this stat, Dominic, completely erased it, took it out. I was like, you know what? It's not enough time for him to make the kind of improvements to really make this more. I think it's going to be a closer fight than the second one for sure, and that'll show in my picks for our below average bet slip later. But I just can't see him getting the win. And I think that potentially you see him move the bantamweight after this.
Yeah, and I truly, people, for what it's worth, too. I know he looks to be in great shape right now. We're excited. He looks like he's making the weight easy, but just tread lightly and be prepared. As we're recording this on Wednesday night. We have to make it to weigh-in day on Friday morning. This is a guy that has had notorious issues with cutting the weight. Not that he's missed a ton, but he does have trouble making it. He did miss when he got his first shot at Joseph Benavidez. So just keep it in the back of your head. That's all I'm saying going into this fight.
Well said. Let's move on to the pick'em fight of the week. This is the fight that has the closest odds as we record, and there's a couple that are pretty close, but definitely here, Michael Morales versus Trevin Giles. Kind of interesting line as Michael Morales at minus 130, but Trevin Giles is basically in a pick'em situation here, plus 105. So, Dominic, it seems pretty clear that people are very high on the Dana White Contender Series product. That is Michael Morales, 12-0. I believe 9 knockouts. Trevin Giles, being a much more experienced fighter, has fought in the UFC for a few years now, but he is coming off a loss in a pretty brutal KO fashion. When you look at these odds, do you think that people are sleeping on Trevin Giles a little bit, or do you think that the hype is real with Michael Morales?
Man, a little bit of both, because for Michael Morales, he's 21 years old, so the future, that next wave of fighters, and like you said, he's 12-0, 9 knockouts, a submission, 6 of them in the first round. He looked incredible on the Contender Series, and I think that he get a decision right on the Contender Series.
You might be right.
I think he had a 3-round performance there, basically a shutout performance. But again, when you're debuting in the UFC and you're going up against Trevin Giles, who's 5-3 in the UFC, he's been in there with some ultra tough competition. That's what worries me the most in this one. And it almost relates to last week's Pick'em Fight of the Week when Court McGee was in this instance. I forget, it was against Ramesh Brahimaj, where it was that experience factor for me. And obviously Trevin Giles doesn't have near the experience that Court McGee did last week, but still, the people that he's been in there with in the UFC, he's got 5 wins already in the promotion. He's still young in his own right, only 29. Now, I think there's something to be said here. Trevin Giles moving down to welterweight. He's been fighting at middleweight here, so this is going to be a new thing for us to see. How's he going to look at 170 against a guy that has been an absolute stud there for his entire career? Also, Michael Morales is going to have a 5-inch reach advantage, so there's so many factors into this one. This was another one where I was like, man, I'm really liking Michael Morales, the hype. I kind of want to go with him, but then I'm like, oh. And for what it's worth, throughout the day, Trevin Giles has also closed the gap. He was up to like a plus 120. Now he's a plus 105, almost even money. This is going to be an incredible fight. I don't doubt that for 1 second.
Yeah, I don't really agree with the comparison to the fight that we saw last week in this spot, mostly just because I think Michael Morales is just a much more complete product already than Ramesh Brahimaj is. And obviously I know Trevin Giles is better than Court McGee. But really, I just think that Brahimaj was 1-1 in the UFC. I kind of feel like he was being put in that spot for real no reason. I feel like it kind of suckered some people into picking him because it's like, well, the UFC's got to see something in him, right? Like, why would they put him against Court McGee when he's kind of unproven completely, even as far as a regional product? Here, though, Michael Morales is clearly the real deal. Now, is he already better than Trevin Giles? That I don't know. And I think these odds kind of perfectly encapsulate where both stand. Again, Morales is straight up killing people in the regional circuit. And now I know there's a big step up. He did look fantastic in his Contender Series performance. Did go to a decision, which I don't think really matters for evaluating him because I know he's a big finisher, but he got the job done. While Trevin Giles, he's had a couple losses. He's a little bit of I think he's 5-3 in the UFC.
Yep.
But that fight with Dricus du Plessis, I mean, as big as I am on Dricus, I thought that fight was like the winner of that had a really good shot to become a big player in that division, get a big fight next. So Trevin Giles is no slouch. And I mean, this is a big test to really tell someone, hey, welcome to the UFC. Here's your first fight.
Yeah.
So I do think if you look at the odds, I don't know exactly what the odds are for Trevin Giles via decision. Might be worth it to put a little bit on that, just because I could see Giles really using some of those veteran skills that he's picked up over being in the UFC to try to, outmaneuver the young stud and Michael Morales. And Morales being 21 years old, that's so young.
I know. He's a baby,
Also,
2 years younger than us.
But, also I think some Michael Morales finish picks might not be too bad either, just because I didn't realize that with Trevin Giles. He's moving down a weight class.
Yeah.
We've seen that go one way or another for a lot of guys,
Yeah, this really could be one of those where we could see a coming out party for the new up-and-comer, or someone saying, hold on just a second here. It's still my time. So I'm excited for this one.
That definitely scares me off of this fight, too, altogether. It's just like, how good is Trevin Giles going to look changing weight classes?
Exactly.
Let's get into the dog of the week. This is the underdog that me or Dominic are most confident in going in. And I believe we both hit it last week. You picked Calvin Pater.
I picked Calvin,
And I had
Algio.
Bill Algio. So good first week for us.
Of course.
But now we are again, a tough card. A lot of big underdogs.
Big one. Yeah.
But then, you got some of those that are a little closer, like we just talked about. And some of those you want to stay away from because you have all these, these intervals, like these factors, that outside factors and stuff like that. So, Dominic, with that being said, who is your dog of the week?
Noah, my dog of the week for UFC 270's edition of the Nosebleeds is, and I just switched it when we hopped into the studio, Wellington Turman. He's coming in right now to plus 180. More odds closing on this fight as well today. He was all the way up to like almost a plus 250. So plus 180 here against Rodolfo Vieira, coming in at minus 230. So he's over a 2-1 favorite. I just think that after Vieira lost that fight to Fluffy Hernandez, he gassed so badly. I've never, that I can recall, definitely since we've been doing the podcast, have I seen a fighter gas so quickly and so prominently and just drastically affect the rest of his performance. Then to top it off, he's a world-class jiu-jitsu practitioner, and he gets submitted in the third round. So that whole performance just really kind of leans me to stay away from Vieira here. And while Wellington Turman can be a bit inconsistent as well, I just feel like if he can kind of press forward here and make things ugly and stay away from the takedowns, which he hasn't been taken down yet in the UFC, it could be a big factor for him. He could make it ugly. He could make Vieira tired, potentially get a finish if it gets into a wild striking exchange. So I do like Wellington Turman as my dog of the week at plus 180.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely get that. That is a brutal loss to fashion. And
yeah,
I mean, that is a tough one to come back from. My dog of the week, and I'll talk about Vieira a little bit more later, but my dog of the week is going to be the heavyweight champion, Francis Ngannou. If this fight's 50-50, you have the champion. It's Francis Ngannou. I mean, this is a guy who has, been a wrecking ball since he entered the UFC. Unless he fought the Stipe fight the first time and then that Lewis fight, you take those out of the equation, the guy has literally been Mike Tyson-esque.
Yes.
And I mean, even with those two losses, you can definitely pinpoint what happened there. I mean, it was clearly he has grown a lot from those losses. And, the Lewis fight was just a really weird one. But since that fight, you look at the streak he's been on, first round knockouts, then he knocks out Stipe in the second.
Mm-hmm.
This is his toughest test. And it might be the toughest test he'll get in his entire UFC career. I mean, even more so than maybe another fight with Stipe or John Jones.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of remains to be seen. But Ciryl Gane, make no mistake, is the most complete product that maybe the heavyweight division's ever produced.
Very possible, yeah.
And it just might not matter. I know I kind of said similar things about the Derek Lewis fight, but I was very confident Gane was going to win that fight. My
Yeah.
whole thing was it just for Gane, a guy who's technically so skilled. I have no doubt for 5 rounds he will be technically magnificent.
Hmm.
But the guy like Ngannou only has to be magnificent for one punch.
One punch. He has the equalizer. He
Yeah.
does.
And now, can Gane take a shot or two from Ngannou? I don't know. I mean, you saw Stipe do it in the first fight.
True.
Not to say that like you want to take punches from Ngannou
No,
either
not at
way,
all.
but if he were to get caught by one or two, it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to drop like a ton of bricks. I mean, maybe
Right.
he can hang in there a little bit, but we don't know. Now, I just think when you have a champion with plus odds, it's very hard to not take it.
Yeah.
And it's what, plus 125? Is that what it
Plus
is? Right now?
120.
Plus 120. So not a huge underdog, but considering he is the champion walking in, and take out who he's fighting here in Ciryl Gane. This isn't a champion who's coming in that's, well past his prime, and it's, like Randy Couture when he was like the heavyweight champion at 45 years old. It's not like a guy who it's like, okay, he's got to finally be like coming to the end of the road. This is a guy in his prime who's been knocking out people left and right and has looked like he's gotten so much better in his last time out. And he's kind of being disrespected a little bit. And there's a lot of factors that go into it.
That'll
But-
be in the podcast episode.
yeah. But all in all, I got to go with the champ.
I like it, man. Gosh, that fight's so sick.
So now we'll move on to the below average bet slip. This is just a part of the show where we put the
we
plays
go.
we're making for the week, Dominic. And you have 3 this week,
That's right. I've got
and I
3.
have 3 as well. So we're going to have a nice 6 plays for the week for you guys. So, Dominic, do we want to start with the parlays first?
Well, I say we do it, man. Why
Yes.
not?
Yeah, so me and Dominic, we both decided to go with the one parlay each. We didn't plan that, but it's the way it worked out. So, Dominic, your first parlay.
It is a 3-leg all money line parlay. Total odds being plus 810. So we could be looking at a nice little payday potentially, but it's not going to come easy. So first leg is Jasmine Jazdavicius. I hope I said that right, but she's going up against Kay Hansen. She's at plus 180. She's coming off of a pretty impressive performance from the Contender Series. The third round and that fight got a little iffy, but I just feel like with her size, her reach, she's going to have a 5-inch height and reach advantage. She's a grinder type style, and I just think it's not a good matchup for Kay Hansen, especially being at 125 pounds. I think she's going to be outsized and outmatched. So I'm going with her with an underdog pick there. The other underdog, my second leg, Gennaro Valdez. He's coming in at plus 150. He's going up against Matt Frivola. So for those that don't know Valdez, another Contender Series alum. He's 10-0, all 10 wins via finish, 7 KOs, 3 submissions. He had a second-round TKO on the Contender Series. Frivola on a 2-fight skid, including the 7-second knockout to Terrence McKinney last year. So I just think I'm riding some momentum here for Valdez along with the power and finishing prowess. And to finish off the parlay, another Contender Series alum, my favorite Contender Series fighter from Season 5 this past year, Jack Della Maddalena from Australia. He's a minus 335, so he's a pretty big favorite here. But his striking is so impressive. He's elusive with his footwork. He's very accurate. He is going up against kind of an unknown, which makes me a little hesitant on this one. Pete Rodriguez is 4-0, all 4 wins by KO, TKO, but he's taking this fight on short notice. And I think with the skill set I saw last year from Jack on the Contender Series, he's going to be one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, if I'm putting it quite frankly. So I had to cap him off there with the third leg of the parlay. Again, all of them put together, we got plus 810.
That's insane. The plus 810.
Yeah, that's a big.
I like it. My 3-leg parlay is a little more quaint. Plus 275 altogether. It's 2 money lines and 1 prop. Kay Hansen is actually one of my 2, so Kay Hansen via money line. I personally was not all that impressed with Jasmine Jasudavicius and her Contender Series, turnout. I understand why they brought her in. They're looking to kind of fill out that division a little more. And she is an interesting style matchup in this encounter. Kay Hansen coming off a loss to Corey McKenna. I thought Kay Hansen won that fight, but, it is what it is. And she is giving up a lot of reach here, so how will she be able to close that distance, get to her bread and butter? It's an interesting matchup, but I like Kay Hansen enough to put her in here. And then Rodolfo Vieira. So, once again, going against one of Dom's other picks. He's going up against Wellington Turman, and I get it. Being kind of scared off by what you saw previously. And I don't expect I think a lot of people might feel similar to you because that fight is very memorable. For that
Yes, it
reason.
is.
But he did gas out so bad, and how noticeable it was because he really had never looked like that previously.
Yeah.
His gas tank's never really been that much of an issue. So much so that it makes me wonder, was this just an outlier? And to that point, I think Wellington Turman is a decent bounce back opponent, another inconsistent opponent who's I think he's lost his last couple fights as well. And Rodolfo Vieira easily has the best skill in the octagon, and that's going to be his jiu-jitsu. Yes, he did get submitted, but I don't see Wellington Turman being able to do that to him. Maybe that'll be my kiss of death right there. But the last leg, this is the only prop, Jack Della Maddalena by KO.
Yeah.
I originally just had Jack Moneyline. I will let everybody know we got our odds. The Moneyline odds come from Barstool Sportsbook. As far as for some of these props, we're recording this Wednesday evening, and Barstool didn't have all of the props for this whole card, so we did use DraftKings for certain odds. And Jack, in this parlay specifically, I used DraftKings for. So plus 275. I think it's interesting that you were talking about his opponent, how, he's 4-0, I think, or 4-1 or 4-0.
Unknown 4-0.
Yeah, so you never know what you're going to get there. All four via finish. But if anything, I think that finishing rate tells me that this fight will not go to distance. And I thought what I saw from Jack in his fight with Anglosa, I think is how you pronounce it, on the Contender Series was really high-level stuff. And I think this is going to be a welcome home party a bit for him in the UFC. Welcome to the show. I think he's going to really put on a highlight reel performance here in his debut.
Yeah, I believe in that guy, man. I do.
Now, for the second bet, what do you
got? So this is just a prop bet here. So it's going to be the co-main event, Brandon Moreno, Deiveson Figueiredo. I've got this fight inside the distance, so there will be a finish. It will not go to decision. It's minus 167. Brandon Moreno's finished 14 out of 19 wins, including the rematch against Deiveson Figueiredo when he got the submission. And for Deiveson, he's finished 17 out of 20. He has that eraser at flyweight, a guy that carries power that we've never seen. For what it's worth, Moreno hasn't ever lost other than a decision. All 5 of his losses have been decisions. But I still feel that if Deiveson can pull this out, I think he's really going to come in and want to take Brandon's head off here. He's looking to get revenge and stuff, all this storyline buildup that, again, will be discussed on the podcast if you're interested. But I see a finish going here either way. I've tried to envision it all day long, and I was sitting on it. I'm like, you know what? Regardless of who wins, I can't see it going to the judges. I can't.
So I also have something for the co-main event here, but this one I'm taking the over on 3.5 rounds for Moreno Figueiredo. Now that's at minus 115. Basically, I'm not saying there won't be a finish, but I fully expect Figueiredo to be better here. I expect this to be a closer fight. And it's hard because if this is a closer fight, maybe you get one similar to the first fight. And I don't know if either of those guys can really go through that again. I mean,
yeah.
That was such a war, and you saw what happened. The toll that took on the guy who likely won without the point deduction, Figgy, he had to be carted out and taken to the hospital. I mean, he was in bad shape.
Yeah.
So it's a questionable one because, Moreno did look so good in that second fight. And maybe he just comes out here and does the same thing. But I don't see it going that way. You see a lot of times with these immediate rematches, the champion that lost typically puts up a better fight the second time. Zhang Wei Li against Rose, Joanna and Jacek against Rose. um, if I think of like Daniel Cormier against Stipe, when
They
that
both
third
did it
fight.
to each other.
Yeah.
But
So all in all, I just think that you'll see a better showing, but I'm still thinking that, like, in my head, I think Moreno's going to win, but I just think the fight goes longer. Might still get a finish, but not going to be to the championship rounds, in my opinion.
see, it's possible B&O could both cash, but we have a really small gap that we need it to happen for that
Yep.
fight.
Now, this last one, we cannot both cash.
Somebody's got to win. Somebody's got to lose.
So what do you got for our last one?
Noah, I went with it. I saw the plus value, pretty decent plus value, and I'm like, you know what? I'm doing it. So I've got Ciryl Gane, the interim champion, to win by finish. It's plus 150 odds. Look, 7 out of his 10 wins have came via finish. I know he's as technical as they come. He could, I could easily see him getting a decision win here. But at the same time, I don't know if I see Ngannou being able to last 5 rounds at the pace that Gane's going to want to fight. I think he could potentially find an opening. And Noah, if he were to finish Francis Ngannou to become the undisputed champion, he would be the first person ever to stop Francis Ngannou. He has 4 losses. All 4 have been via decision. I'm taking a risk, but I'm going with the plus 150 Ciryl Gane to win by finish.
Mine's also plus 150, but when I saw this, I jumped on it immediately. Even if I was like 95% certain Ciryl Gane was going to win this fight, I see plus odds for Ngannou by knockout. I jump on that every day of the week.
You ain't ever going to see it again,
Plus 150 for Ngannou by KO. It's really the only way I see him winning this fight.
Yeah.
And not that that's like some long shot. I mean, it's pretty realistic possibility. But I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I understand Ciryl Gane, undefeated, never been finished, obviously, because of that. And really hasn't even looked hurt at all. He does such a great job with his leg kicks and his leg attacks, or his, he'll do body kicks and stuff to keep a good distance, keep his head out of range. And Ngannou's kind of untested when it comes to leg kicks, but really it's just, if Ngannou's going to win this fight, he's going to do it one way. And I already kind of think he's being underestimated a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a big chip on his shoulder coming in here. Put money on Ngannou to retain via KO.
All it takes is one shot, Noah.
Whew. But that is going to wrap it up for this edition of the Nosebleeds. Let us know what plays you're making this weekend. What sportsbook are you using? All that, just for shits and gigs,
Yeah, of course.
Just curious. But make sure to let us all know that. We'll tell you how to do so here momentarily. Make sure to check out our new podcast episode. It's uploading tomorrow. The preview for UFC 270 and a couple of fight announcements and stuff like that we're going to go over. We'll get more into the X's and O's, the storylines going in, which there are some big ones for this card, so you don't want to miss it. But until then, Dominic, tell the good people where they can find us on social media.
You can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, at DSlee14. More importantly, go follow, go engage, go interact with us, with the podcast collectively on Twitter, on Instagram, at BAJ_MMA podcast.
Yep. For me, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, at NTBaker_. If you go to the link in my bio, it'll take you to a link tree, which presents you a list of links to all the platforms the podcast is on, along with social media platforms. So that includes, but it's not limited to. Dominic, really, you cut me off again, dude. Anyways, the Twitter, the Instagram, the Instagram, the YouTube channel, and Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. It's all on there. And there's a couple links for the podcast sponsor.
Yes.
First, leaving a voice message. Again, that would be a great way for you to let us know your plays. If you hit anything big, let us know.
Yeah.
Also, there's a link on there if you want to become a supporter of the podcast. So if any of those winnings you get from this weekend, if you'd like to sprinkle some of that and donate it to our show.
Especially if we lose all of our money.
It'd be much appreciated. But that's it. We're out, and we'll see y'all tomorrow.
Oh.